that was the turning point in my life. You know, that was the moment that everything trajectory-wise just changed. And yeah, I'll just never forget the day. Came out of school, Mum came to pick me up, and she was just very quiet, and she just said the phrase, "Everybody's at your grandma's house, but your dad's not there." And she just said, "Look, your dad's taken his life. He's not here anymore." I've experienced like the depths of the human experience, like that journey through therapy. I can't tell you how tough. That was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. After losing Paps to suicide, I shared my story to 5 million people on TV for Channel 4, where I performed a song called "Learn to Live" about my journey, exactly what I just spoke to you about, and showed that on stage, performed its piece of music, and that saved the lives of a number of men who reached out to me afterwards. And now I'm like, now I'm at this point, and now that whole journey I look back on makes sense. We're at a point in the system where things like anxiety, depression, self-harm, eating disorders are at an all-time high. It's not a joke, it's a serious thing. Is your young lad a killer? As we saw headlines after adolescence. Do you know how I get really... It makes me so angry for young lads. Like, I think what's important is...
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. We're sharing the stories of our guests. I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. Hope you can join us on this journey. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant. It's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events, enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted and really honoured to have the legend that is Mr. Daniel Wilshire on today. Dan, how are you, mate?
Good afternoon. I'm good, mate. Really good. I was just saying, I've had a lovely stretch of sunshine in Manchester the past few weeks. Business is good, after a challenging few months. Family are healthy, creating change. Back down in Brighton after obviously coming here for the second time to deliver the TEDx talk. So I'm pleased, mate. Things are good at the moment.
Mate, it's good to hear. I mean, that's obviously where we met. That I obviously saw you on the TEDx stage, and I think I was the first person you'd walked off. I was there, and I couldn't really hardly speak because you, as with many, you left. There was a lot of emotion going around that day, and it was so, mate, just one of the most powerful talks I'd ever heard, and everyone I'd spoke to about it afterwards were like, oh, wow, how powerful that was, and your story was just resonated so much with me and a lot of the mission I'm on with a podcast. So grateful for you taking the time out to come on today, mate.
Yeah, and I said to you afterwards, because after I delivered the TEDx talk, I create the whole talk in my imagination, and so prior, because obviously I'd never delivered it before, so this was the first time I'd delivered that talk. So in the kind of the run up to delivery, you're always trying to perceive how the audience is going to take it, but you still never know. And I came off the stage, and I always have this window of like 10 to 20 minutes afterwards where people expect you to come off and be like overwhelmed, like super buzzing. I'm not. I'm like, okay, how's it gone? Like, you know, has it been too heavy? Did it land okay? You know, has it impacted people? And so I remember coming out and I had all these questions and, you know, going around in my head of, was it good enough? Did the audience connect with it? You know, as much as I knew I delivered it well. And it was nice because the first person that I seen was obviously you. I came out the side doors around the back. And yeah, you just said, listen, you said, we need to connect. That was amazing. And that was nice for me because then I was like, all right, I can breathe. Yeah. I was like, the one person's enjoyed it. So I was like, that's good enough for me with one person in the room. But no, it was a magical experience and a big thing for me to tick off as a speaker. And, you know, even just afterwards to hear about the standing ovation and stuff. For me, that was, that was powerful because that was my goal for the talk. In the morning, I was pacing up and down my hotel room thinking, what goal am I going to set myself? And I was like, I need the standing ovation. So yeah, that and your comment highlights me. Thank you.
Literally, will it? We're gonna delve straight in, but I'm gonna kick off as we do with everyone. I mean, this is the big thing. We're kicking off Series 8 with this episode, and which is amazing. Let's go straight in. How do you define success? What's it mean to you, mate?
It's a big question, isn't it? And success for me, I think, is easily defined, to be fair. As much as it's a big question, I can boil it down to one thing, which is important for me, and that is, if I'm on my deathbed tomorrow, if I'm sat in that hospital bed, can I die with content knowing that, you know, I've lived my life the way I wanted to, and, you know, that I've made an impact and left the world a little bit better than I found it, or at least been in the pursuit of doing so. And that's a big thing for me. Like, I want to be able to die and look back and go, actually done, like, well done for how you've spent your minutes on the earth. If I can have that feeling, you know, on my deathbed at the moment that I'm going to pass on to wherever, and I can answer that question and say, yeah, like, you've done good, that's success for me.
I love that. There's so many times on the podcast I've referenced a book by Bronnie Ware, the 5 Regrets of the Dying, and the biggest regret is I've not lived a life true to myself. I've not lived a life in accordance with my values, and that's like from a palliative nurse to speak to people, and that's it. And that's it. Right? We're here, and actually spending the time doing the things that you love doing something that lights you up, but actually finding what that purpose means. And that's important.
And I suppose it only half answers your question, doesn't it? Because I said, look, about me being able to look back at my life and say, you know, well done for how you spent your time. But I define what time well spent is. And so for me, spending my time well is, you know, is pushing my limits, finding where they are, is being of service to others, which obviously we'll speak a lot about today. But the biggest thing, again, is just, you know, have I left the world a better place than I found it, or at least tried to do so, and like just trying to leave positivity in everyone that I come into contact with, or whatever it is, a little piece of me, a little positive part of myself. You know, if I can look back and, you know, yes, you know, dreams of you know, building the business and all of those sorts of things, but the biggest thing for me is kind of like the legacy and who I'm remembered, like what I'm remembered for, and what people say about me as an individual. Because again, like when you're at your funeral, like no one's going to be going, oh God, I remember Daniel because he did you know, 50,000 public speaking talks, or he made this much in his business, or he had a business with 1,500 people in, or whatever it is. If we get there, amazing. But, you know, people aren't going to say that. They're going to say, listen, he was the best dad, he was the best brother, he was the best this, you know, he made such an impact in his community. He was someone who, you know, always was a light, spread light wherever he went. He was someone who gave people hope. You know, I want people to say, you know, to say those things. And so, yeah, my second part to question 1 of success, would be that.
I love that. And I think that for me, like, one of the things that really hit home, and the stuff that you talk about, especially in your TEDx thing, something you alluded to there, hope, right? Like that, how you delivered it, and the way you communicated it in that way. I think for me, and I think anyone that is struggling, that's in a bad place, wherever they are on their journey, sometimes that's all we need, right? Is that little glimmer of hope. And And I think that's such an important thing for people to hear, right?
Yeah, when you can see a way out, when you have hope for your future, challenges that you face in the present are naturally not as scary because you can see a way out. It's when we lose hope. It's when we don't see a way out. It's when you don't see a future where obviously then challenges, things become extremely difficult. And so hope is a huge thing. But I think how to create and cultivate hope, that's a whole thing within itself, and it's something that I've been privileged enough to be able to understand the workings of through the work that I've done, and it wasn't by design, in a sense, that I've come to a point of understanding the role that service plays in creating hope for ourselves. It was by having a vision and a dream after some very difficult experiences that kind of just came to me. After being in hardship, being in struggle, being in some of the scariest places that I'd been in as a human. It was after being those that I had an idea to just give back, and I didn't know the ways in which that would build so much hope into my own life and into who I am as an individual. And so I've been blessed to experience that. But now I'm like, cool, well, now I know this. I was like, I need everyone else to know it as well. So now I'm like, all right, sweet. Like, I'm going to tell people how we can create a little bit of hope. And I think, it's not as complex as people may feel it is. And I think there's certain parts of it that we, often go unnoticed. The role of service. I speak about this when it comes to looking after mental health in ourselves or the mind. When it comes to those things, especially when we're struggling, we tend to focus internally on the things that we need as individuals. So, I need more time. I need to get to the gym. I need to go to therapy to talk about kind of my things and all those sorts of things. We can be very much focused on kind of what we need as individuals, which is important because, especially, and you'll know it yourself, like when you're in difficult times, like being a little bit selfish is really important because you need to give yourself those things. But how often do we ask ourselves, even in those moments, like, what can I give to somebody else, or what can I do for somebody else? Because there's something beautiful in service, in changing what we're focusing on fundamentally. If I can shift my focus from all the things I may be struggling with, or the rumination, or the 100 mile an hour thoughts that are like rushing around my head, causing me the distress, if I can shift my focus onto, okay, like how can I bring a bit of light into this person's life, and then action it, and then see them smile, and then experience gratitude, and then know, actually, if I can do that for them, maybe I can do it for myself. But I'm also seeing them feel positive because of something I've done. Naturally, I'm going to feel better. I can shift the focus from our problems onto something positive, and build relationships through service, experience gratitude, and experience hope for the future. And I think that question of like, what can I do for someone else is not often an area we tend to look when it comes to to building hope for ourselves. But I think it's the most powerful one that I've experienced anyway.
Really, I don't know. I've shared a couple of times recently about, and I've spoke about on the podcast a few times around. There was a podcast I listened to called The Path of a Swami, which was from a monk, and he talks about the feelings of success, what it means to feel successful. And the three elements that he alluded to was genuinely being happy for others who are successful. So I'm really happy. I've seen you be successful, and I'm genuinely happy. There's no ego or jealousy there, just genuine happiness. Loving the thing that you do. But the third one, and a little bit of helping others to be successful. So again, I guess linking into that in service, doing something for other people, the gratitude and how that makes you feel. And again, it's back to what you said earlier about lying on your deathbed and actually what people say about you. It's not about what you did necessarily or how you did it, but how you made people feel. And that's that all links up, doesn't it? All back to the thing of if you do something for someone else, how that will make you feel to make them feel better, and vice versa.
Yeah, and if you look at that formula in kind of my own life in terms of my own work with, the speaking and the business stuff, like those 3 points of, I would argue the second two then create the first one that he mentioned. So the idea of of doing something you enjoy was the second point, and the third one was helping others to be successful. In my role now, I get to do so many things that I enjoy, from the public speaking. I love being in front of audiences and speaking and designing the products itself. I love business. I love sales. I get to perform my music at the end, with the piano. So those are all things that I genuinely, truly love to do. And I obviously have 80% of business that is not too enjoyable. So I'm not sitting here saying, every single. There are some things I hate to do. I was going to swear then, which would have told you how much I
feel free to swear.
I fucking hate to do. Basically, there's some things where
we alluded a little bit offline, didn't we? Get them spreadsheets out of
exactly that. But I get to then experience that 20% or 30% of like true passion for the craft that I'm engaged in. So that's one part. The second part, obviously, is the idea of then I'm lifting people up all the time when I'm doing that stuff. And even the mundane tasks are easier to do when there's a greater purpose at the end. But, when I can sit with a kid and he can realise, I do a vision and values workshop with him, and I get him to understand what his values are, and then define a vision for his future. And he's a kid who's never had anyone believe in him, and I can sit there and work through and tell him how much I believe he's going to do those things, and he can design his own vision for the next 5 to 10 years and whatnot, and just see the smile on his face, and help him, find a dream and have something to work towards. Or if it's, the person in business who's been really struggling with their mental health, and I deliver a talk in a business, and then I get a message 2-3 months later, thank you so much, Dan. I'd have never been the man to speak to anyone or to face some of these issues. It's been 3 months. I've been going through counselling. It was really tough at the start, but now I feel so much better. Work have supported me. I've got better relationships with management, and I'm enjoying my life again. Thank you so much. And my family, whatever it is, and help them be successful in that way. Amazing. But I think then that comes on to, that last point of being genuinely happy for others. I'll be honest, as an entrepreneur, and as a competitive lad at the start, I didn't always, probably this year, this is genuinely honest, like I didn't always find that so easy. So I probably had a little bit of that, God, like he's doing this and he's doing this and whatever, and why am I not doing it? Like that's with the space that I've been in as an entrepreneur, and like competitive and wanting to keep everything, like Daniel, like I'll just do everything myself and I'll keep it and like now, like this probably past 18 months, for me, I'm like, want to bring as many people in, want to help as many people, and because of the point that I'm in and the things that I'm doing now, like I love when I see people doing things, and succeeding and doing amazing work. And there's so much, especially in the field that I'm working in, there's so much support that's needed, especially for young people, but for the people as a whole, like it's hard at the moment. Like it is tough at the moment. There's no two ways about it. Life, it's tough, and it's naturally meant to be that way. Obviously, the first principle of Buddhism, isn't it, is to first accept that life is suffering. But listen, it feels a little bit more, intense here at the moment. But again, like just seeing people thrive and push themselves and build amazing things and support people. There's nothing better than that, and so it's I think it's the gentleman that you mentioned, it's a winning formula. But I think there's also the path of doing something that you love and trying to monetize that. There's risk involved, and that's the other side, and that's a tough journey, and that's a different conversation on its own. But I think there's ways you can integrate it where it doesn't have to be your business. You can find little ways to integrate it into your life where you've still got it there, but it's not maybe 9 to 5. And you can build, love for craft in other ways outside of just committing fully to being a public speaker. But if you can do that, amazing, or whatever your dream is, I think, it's a good thing.
What shifted for you? You said about 18 months ago. What shifted for you to have that feeling where you sort of, when you're in it and it's competitive and you're looking, I want to do this, I want to do that. And what was the shift for you to go, actually, I am genuinely feel better in this space. I want to collaborate or work with other people and feel that. Was there a shift there?
It wasn't that I didn't want to collaborate, and it wasn't that I wasn't like pleased for people when they did really well. I had that very young entrepreneurial competitive, like I'm going to be this and I'm going to do this and and like that, like kind of like that feeling when it came to kind of my own journey. But I'll be honest with you, I think it was because of potentially where I was at in my own journey. I had really big things that I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to tick some of those things off, and so the idea, like everything felt very, very, you know, intense, and everything mattered down to the nth degree. And so it kind of created a little bit of that kind of like competitiveness where I was like, you know, I wanted to prove. I think there was a bit of proving, the idea that I kind of wanted to prove to people that, you know, that I could reach success, or I could reach achievement on my own, and prove to people that, you know, I was Daniel who was capable. And there's multiple truths. Like, this is one truth. There was also Daniel at the time that, again, like, was, you know, wanted people to win and was supporting. Collaboration was really important for me, but there was also that truth that existed as part of who I was. And I think that part of me came from 16 years old, being head boy. Everything came easy, like straight A's, like football team, like, you know, socially accepted, writing music, to then scraping a BTEC in college, like nearly failing, getting into passing my grade 5 music theory exam by a mark, which if I failed it I wouldn't have got into uni, and then failing university, and then having the failed business after uni, and then doing really well in corporate for the first 6 months, and then just being like not being able to hit my targets and not putting any money on the board, and then like having, you know, multiple failed ventures at that point, and then again joining another company and struggling really to meet expectation in there, and then obviously going through therapy and having that whole year as well, and not that was around not being able to achieve, because by definition the therapy was my biggest achievement to date easily, but more so on the business world and the work side of things. Like, I wasn't, that time for me, I had to take a step back from career and everything so that I could strip myself down so I could then rebuild again. That was hard. And I think there was an element of me that, you know, my whole life, from Daniel who excelled in his group guitar class within the first 3 weeks, and so I had to have lessons on his own, you know, at 5 years old, to then, you know, up to 16, to then having that, what I call my fall from grace in a sense. Everyone always had hope for my future from 5 to 16. You would ask, what's Daniel doing? He's going to have a career in the music industry. He's going to do this, or he's going to work in business. He's going to do, like, there was that level of hope and self-belief, and that was powerful for me as a young lad. But it came quite easily. It didn't require like massive amount of work for me to do. I just naturally pretty talented at stuff, and I did a load of different things, and obviously it did work, and I paid attention in class and whatnot. But those things again came quite easy. When I lost those things and I started to not do well, and then I saw people lose hope in who I was. My mum will always say, and my family would always say, they always supported me, but I could see the worry, and when I would tell them about ideas, or I would drop out of uni or whatever it was, I could see people were losing hope in me, and I had this weird gap where I was questioning, like, all my life I've been thinking, like, I'm Daniel who's going to be super successful, and Daniel who's going to have the career in the music industry, and now I do even know who I am, because at the moment I can't make anything happen. So I think there was an element when I first got into business where I'd completed therapy and I picked momentum up again, you know, and I felt like I could flourish and I could live as, you know, I felt closer to childhood Daniel after therapy than I'd ever felt in my whole entire life, which was amazing, because I was like, I am who I am, do you know what I mean? But I was like, now I need you lot to see it. So I think there was an element of coming round to a point of like still having that trying to prove young entrepreneurial like side of like, I need people to know that I'm capable, that I can achieve, and that I can do things, you know, and that I can be successful. And naturally over my journey now, you know, past 2 years, like I was saying, like I just don't have, I found a lot more peace, because I've been able to pretty much answer that question that I said to you at the start of like, I know, Sam, if tomorrow I'm in the hospital bed, something crazy's gone on, and doctors are saying, listen, Dan, you've got a couple hours left. Like, genuinely, I can sit here and go, I'm really, really pleased with how I've lived, and what I've been able to give to people, and what I've tried. I've not reached all my goals. I'm not there yet. I've got so much that I want to do. But I know if I died tomorrow, I could look back and go, Dan, like, well fucking done for how you spent it. So that element of the showing and the like that really competitive, or like trying to less competitive, trying to prove, because I'm still competitive now. If we play ping pong, I'm trying to win. But you know, less around that trying to prove, and more so just enjoying the journey of becoming, which sounds poetic, sounds beautiful, and I don't want to like paint it as this very peaceful, like enlightened state, because as I said to you before, I still battle with internal narratives around, Dan, you're not good enough, you're not done enough, you're not far enough yet, and those will always exist. But deep down, I know that's kind of like my foundation of knowing that actually, even when those narratives come in, hold on a sec, Dan, let's zoom out a little bit. You know, what have you done? Like, what's your impact been? Like, look at the letters you've got, look at the messages you've got. You're doing okay. It's okay to have big dreams, but doing okay for now.
I think there's a couple of things there for me. One, firstly, I guess like we're all lying if we don't say at some point we crave that external validation, right? And social media sets it up for that. But society as a whole, like we're lying if we don't. I think everyone somehow craves that a little bit. We look outwards, so we're looking outwards to get validated for stuff. But the real journey and the real thing, and this happened, you know, I think it happens a lot. People call it midlife crisis, but but a lot of people wait until later, like my sort of age group, where you get to a point where you, for the first time, you start to look inwards. And I think to have that level of self-awareness at your age and actually start to look inwards, therapy will help with stuff like that. But when you start, I think you can get to that point, right, of peace, and you get to that point of going, if I died tomorrow, I've done, because I know I am in here, and and again, back to living in alignment with values and living where you are. But that can only happen if you're prepared to do the work on yourself, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that, you know, I people will say, Dan, it's like you've lived multiple lives, like you're wise beyond your years. People are always saying it's like, because I've experienced like the depths of like the human experience, like that journey through therapy. I can't tell you how tough. That was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life after losing Paps to suicide. Because sitting in a chair opposite a fella and confronting things that I thought genuinely I would go my whole life without telling people, you know, and not only just confronting them once, but doing that every single week for 4 months till you break, and then you've got another 6 months, 8 months ahead of you to then understand and try and reframe some of the beliefs that have come from the experiences that has taken you 4 months to even just start to speak about, and to sit there and to cry your eyes out, and to go home and to be so drained that you can't go to work, and then to cry for another half an hour on your on your bed on your own, and to have to delve into and relive the emotions and relive and try and understand where to go. That journey, wow, was very, very hard, whilst trying to maintain a high performance role, whilst hiding it from everybody, you know, whilst coming off the back of a load of drugs and having a temptation to just want to be reckless and go back to all the drugs and fighting that in the same breath, whilst trying to keep your body in shape and all whatever it is, like, you know, balancing that as a journey was ridiculously tough. And I had to strip myself. That was like my first ego death, in a sense, which was a phrase that I heard recently, and it like perfectly summarizes what my journey through therapy was, because I had to get rid of everything that I believed about myself and strip it back down to ground zero. Little example, and I always find this quite funny. One of my defense mechanisms, and this will tell you, kind of, I'll give you allude to the place that I was in at the time. One of my defense mechanisms as a young lad was, if I looked amazing on the outside, then no one would think I wasn't doing okay on the inside. But that was to an extreme where I couldn't, Sam, go to Tesco Express at the bottom of my building without wearing nice clothes, because I would be fearful subconsciously of, I needed people to think on the exterior that, God, he's a young lad, he's killing it, he's smashing it, he must be doing well, his life must, because inside I'm in chaos, and I didn't want people to know that. So if I look amazing on the outside, and if you meet me at 22, even when I'm not hitting targets in work, and I'm telling you, yeah, Sam, I've got these big dreams, and I'm going to buy my mum a house at 26, and my therapist used to call it the Ferrari. You know, if I present that to you, you're not going to ever think, actually, let me ask this geezer if he's all right, you know, because what he's presenting is there. And so one of my tasks in therapy was to go to Tesco in like creased clothing, like odd socks and my sliders, and I remember thinking, I can't fucking do it. Like this. Wow. But I had to, like, you know, I had to get rid of those. I had to change the beliefs around those things. And I remember coming back, went into my therapy session. I've done it. Do you know what I mean? I've done it. I went to Tesco, You know, even little things like that, which was wild, and a really powerful experience from my time in therapy was when I first sat down. I was in my Hugo Boss suit. I had like tie, obviously rings on, all that, like pocket square, like shoes, overcoat, Hugo Boss briefcase, like yeah, all of that stuff. And I sat down and I sat in the seat, back straight, arms crossed, looking at the therapist, and he just looked confused. And he told me like 3 weeks in, he's like, Dan, I'll be honest with you. It's like the past 3 weeks. He's like, I feel like you're interviewing me. I feel like you're the therapist. Usually have people come in and they just start breaking down crying because they're going through a load of stuff in life, which is why they're in the therapy seat. He said, you come in and you sit up straight and you sit proper and you're in your Hugo Boss suit and you ask me questions and you present as if I'm the one being like interviewed. And it was so interesting because, again, defense mechanism, I'm sat in the therapy seat and I'm still pretending life is sweet. Do you know what I mean? But then at the end, my last session, and I didn't realise this at the time, but he turns to me and he goes, before you leave, Danny, just I want you to notice what you're wearing. And I looked down and I had like slight patches where my like hole, like not a hole, but like a little seam that had been gone in my trousers, my Charles Tyrwhitt trousers, trousers that I'd had on for time. My shoes were all scuffed. It was the same ones I had at the start. I was in just an open shirt, 2 buttons down, sleeves rolled up, didn't have the suit, didn't have the bag, whatever it was. I was just comfortable. And he said, you notice how as you've become more comfortable with who you are, you don't need all the stuff on the end. And so that journey of therapy, like I say to people all the time, like transformational. It was incredible, extremely difficult, but what it did do was give me an understanding of the events that I'd been through and how they'd shaped certain beliefs and how those beliefs would then impact my ability to navigate life through, you know, those beliefs would form certain behaviours and how those behaviours would show up, especially in times of difficulty. And the beautiful process of understanding that is that when you're aware, now I can go, okay, sweet, I know I'm getting the urge to go and smash some Charlie at the weekend or whatever it is. I can feel the urge, Dan. I can sit there and I know it's because your grandma's just passed or this has gone on, or, you know, you've had a tough week or a friend's done this or whatever. I can sit there and go, yeah, I can feel the recklessness, but I can go, sweet, but I know where it comes from. And I know why it existed, because that's how I used to get rid of my anger, but now I can speak and I get rid of my anger through conversation. So actually, Dan, let's go in this direction, and started to just rewire things a little bit. And it was interesting, like my relationship with drug abuse and substance abuse and alcohol changed once I'd put down the things that were causing me pain, and once I'd faced them and gave them healthier channels. And so it showed me, and the thing that I learned was that the drugs and the alcohol served a purpose in a sense, which was to get rid of that pain in some way because it needed to come out. Wasn't the healthiest way. And in giving myself healthier tools, then the pain had somewhere to go, and I didn't need the drugs and the alcohol. I'd done the work, and so even that then had a massive knock-on effect on my life and in my direction.
Wow, mate, that's so powerful, and I think for anyone listening, like wherever they are, like the importance of a couple of things really for me. That self-awareness piece, right? But you can only become, I think you can only become self-aware once you've done the work and you're looking at inside and you're asking them yourself some fucking hard questions, right? And I think that's a challenge. I'm really keen to. I always say we want to go back to the beginning and start of I guess your journey, and you know how life as a child, what that was like, and how that impacted you. And obviously you've got a very specific story around that and your childhood. But I guess just for listeners, just share that little. That piece there of talk to me about right back at the start and that journey, and obviously losing your dad to suicide at age 9. Talk to me about that process and the impact that has.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I feel, and like psychologically, this kind of does happen when you go through kind of depression or you go through a difficult event like a suicide, for example. It can taint the way you view life. So at the start of my journey, you know, I kind of would have come out and gone, you know, life was, you know, growing up was this and it was tough because of this and we lost dads to suicide. I'm trying to not go straight down that route and change my language around it, because there was parts of my childhood which were beautiful, you know, but sometimes you can lose that in trauma, you know, and you can lose that when you go through depression or, you know, suicidal ideation for 4 years or whatever it is. Like, it can taint the way you perceive your past. And I've been aware of that. And so I'm going to start for the first time probably on a podcast talking about some of the beautiful things of growing up, if you'll allow me to do so. And, you know, beautiful home, beautiful mum, Wonder Woman, like genuinely like a superhero. You know, I think people think my story's something to marvel at times. Like this lady, the fact she's still doing what she's doing is incredible. But like loving sisters, a brilliant mum. You know, a lot of playful times with Paps. I definitely remember. You know, a lot of great times, kind of like growing up around the estate. You know, just getting up to the typical kid things. I had an amazing exploration through of music. You know, and bless my mum, even when times she was really struggling financially, the one thing she never dropped was my music. I think my mum. Basically, I'm just going to talk about my mum.
Yeah.
You know,
Amazing,
my mum, you know, let me as a kid just find who I was. She didn't ever put me in a box. So, listen, I was like Nirvana album at 6 years old. I got this biker jacket with tassels on in year 5. You know, any parent would go, Dan, you know, I'm going to keep you over into the sports and whatever. She just let me, I was listening to Alice Cooper, Metallica. You know, then I had like a Tupac album. So I was like all over the shop and just like understanding who I was as a kid, and expressing in any way that I wanted to express at whatever given time. And like my mum allowed me to do that, which I think really helped me gain a great understanding from an early age of like who I actually was, which I think is really important for young kids. So some amazing experiences. The not so amazing or the more challenging things were just a lot of loss. Lost 3 grandparents at a young age, my mum's side of the family, and then granddad on my dad's side. You know, dad, amazing, really funny, like individual, very caring, but you know, had his own issues with alcohol and drinking. And parents ended up divorcing at 5, and so remember dad sitting me down and saying, Dan, you know, I'm not going to be living with you, and I had to choose between like mum and dad's house. I remember from a really young age, like, where do you want to live? And that was a really tough decision at the time, and I remember just being torn for weeks on it. And I ended up, and as a family, we decided that I'd stay at my mum's, and I see my dad every other weekend, or so, which felt, you know, right at the time. And I had these 2 kind of opposing households where my mum, you know, kind of like very together, you know, Polish mum, really hard-working lady, like teacher, but just always kind of grafting, always working, doing really well in a role, and at my dad's with his partner at the time, you know, it was a bit more chaotic. So riding on the front of motorcycles, my dad was partially blind, and riding on the front of motorcycles, you know, my dad's riding through Rochdale Estates on these KTMs, you know, just getting up to crazy stuff as a young person. But I loved that because it was exploration again, and so these 2 opposing households. But dad obviously, you know, unfortunately just descended a little bit further into chaos. But I didn't know as a young kid, obviously, and yeah, I'll just never forget the day. Came out of school, Mum came to pick me up, and she was just very quiet. And I asked, could we not seen Dad? He was in hospital the last time we were supposed to see him, so it'd been longer than usual. And yeah, I just asked her, are we going to see Dad? And I remember her being silent, and we got in the car, and I remember getting in the car. My sisters were inside, which wasn't usually they got themselves home. My sister went to a different secondary school, and there was just this atmosphere like I'd never experienced at that point in my life, never, and I haven't since, to be honest. And I could see Mum's face in the wing mirror, you know, and I could just tell something. You could feel the energy, you know. And she tried. We went to my auntie's house, went to my auntie's home, which was on the way to my grandma's house, my dad's mum's house. And my mum tried to tell us at my auntie's. I remember we went in, she unlocked the door, she pacing up and down, and she couldn't tell us. She had something to say, but it won't come out. And I'm getting, you know, at this point, I'm like, what is going on? And she drove, and we were going past my sister's high school, which was on the estate where we used to live. And she just said the phrase, everybody's at your grandma's house, but your dad's not there. And my 2 sisters stayed silent. And at that point, I just knew, and I started screaming and kicking. and I'm punching the chair in front of me. I'm in the back, my sister's in the front. I'm kicking, I'm screaming, punching the chair. And my mum, I'll never forget, she just put her hand backwards and she just said, "Dan, squeeze my hand as hard as you need to squeeze." And I just squeezed the life out of my mum's hand, and obviously went into my grandma's house. Whole family are there, and she just said, they just said, "Look, your dad's taken his life. He's not here anymore." And you know, when you have those, you know, first thing I did, call my best mate, "Lewis, my dad's dead. He's not here anymore." You know, and he started crying on the phone, and I went and I slept. I cried my eyes out, and I slept for like what felt like 3 days. I think it was about 3 hours. And when you have those experiences as a young person, you know, that was a point. That was the turning point in my life. You know, that was the moment that everything trajectory-wise just changed, and that was tough. You know, that was hard. That was a very, very, very. I won't wish it on any kid, and no kid, no child should have to go through something like. No family should have to go through something like that. You know, and
how much do you actually like? You just described that point, because you sort of go back to 9 years old, and I'll try and go back, and I think you described that moment. How much, I guess, after that period, are you clear about? Do you remember a lot about that period straight after?
Yeah, I remember struggling to eat for 2 weeks. I remember the 6 hours of counselling that we got because I'd lost my dad to suicide, and just how I remember going in thinking like, this is doing nothing. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, you know, six hours of support for a kid who's lost a parent to suicide at 9. I think it probably isn't enough. But you know, it's all we had at the time, and I remember so much. The year afterwards, I think the interesting thing for me was in secondary school, in primary school, sorry. And you know, I was a talented kid, and I remember just cracking on, and I just remember like just getting on with things. And my school at the time, they gave me a place to go if I needed to go. If I wanted to go and write music at any time, I could do, and they were amazing. I remember the amount of praise they gave me, and they gave me in year 6. So I was like head boy of my primary school as well. 2 head boys, brilliant. And I got nursery as well. It was 3. They did a little Tigers camp. Who was your head of your class? I got that one as well. Competitive Dan coming out there. But yeah, they gave me this VIC award, Values, Integrity, Courage. And I remember they had this assembly, year 6, and they put me up in front of the whole school, and they said the winner for the award is Daniel Wilshire. It's for values, integrity, courage. It's because of the way he's shown up in class. It's this, and this, and I knew it wasn't any of those things. I knew it was Paps, and I knew it was the way that I'd still carried myself as a young lad in school. I still, you know, got involved with like Christmas assembly. I was still working. I was doing all those things, but I knew it was about Paps. And I remember they gave me a award, and I turned around and I just started crying. I turned away from everyone. I started crying, and it was so interesting. Like, I remember all those key kind of moments. But I think what was beautiful about my school there was that was the first time that I'd realised, and this was a really powerful lesson, because it's probably at the heart of everything that I do now, is like, good things can come from difficulty. You can get an award from this, or you know, this can. It doesn't have to always be negative. Like, there can be good that can come from something. And because I knew the reason they give me the award was because I'd made it through, and I'd still showed up, and I'd done it because, you know, even in spite of the challenges I'd faced, which is why I turned around and started crying my eyes out, because it wasn't about how I'd done in lesson or my attitude or whatever. It was partly, but the main thing was Paps and still having those things. So I think I learned really early on, like, you know, I can turn something difficult into something good. And then I obviously had secondary school, and I'll never forget my first day. You know, I was going to school. I had a few lads from the estate, because I'd moved from Rochdale to Bury at the time, and so a few people knew about Paps, because I came home, and there was a few people on my street, so a few lads who went to my school on my street, who I'd told, because it was the first thing that I said. And I remember this group coming up to me, "Dan, has your dad killed himself?" And I'm year 7, don't know anyone, I've come from Rochdale. And I'm like, I know a couple of people, and I'm like, yeah, what did he use, Dan? What did he use? How did he do it, Dan? And I'm just like, yeah, he hung himself. And I'm sat there like those are the experiences, and it's so strange because I forget about them, so I don't really think about them as much anymore. But I can remember all the key points when you say about memory, yeah, really easily. But then my journey through school was then, you know, because Dad struggling, getting kicked out of his home, financial problems, issues with alcohol and whatever. I think my fear was like I'm now man of the house. You know, man of my family anyway. The idea of like, there's a lot of guilt around the situation. Felt like it was my fault, and so kind of like I felt like I needed to make it up to my family.
Why did you feel that it was your fault? Why did that play in?
Yeah, so it was around. So naturally, guilt comes in association with any bereavement by suicide. It's a profound feeling that a lot of people experience. Did I call enough? Did I text enough? Those sorts of things. But Dad had called a week before to speak to everyone, and I was angry with him at the time. I tried to put a boundary in place, and my way of doing that was to give the phone back, and I didn't speak to him basically. And so my belief was like, oh, if I'd have chatted to him, you know, he'd still be here because I'm his son. You know, he wanted to hear my voice, and I know that if he'd have heard my voice, then he'd you know, he wouldn't have done what he'd done. And so yeah, the guilt was really, really strong, and so I felt this obligation to rectify it in a sense. And one of my ways and beliefs of doing that was success. Okay, so it was like ambition. It was like if I'm rich, like my family's safe and I'm safe, because money Dad didn't have, you know, and my family didn't have, and so I know that if I'm wealthy, like everyone's safe. And so I was already a talented kid. I was very driven then, and you know, had these big dreams, and would talk about, you know, I want to change the world someday, or I want to do whatever it is. And you know, was very successful, very talented in secondary school. But there was what I would call kind of behavioural breadcrumbs that was leaving through school, which were subconscious ways of asking for support. Whether it was in the music that I was writing, whether it was in the performing arts, acting, you know, things that I would do, whether it was in kind of emotional breakdowns, changes in social group, like there was these key signs, but because I was high achieving, they went unnoticed by family and school, and there wasn't the technology or the language or the consciousness of some of these conversations that are prevalent today in education around kids' mental health anyway. And so, you know, my time and my way of dealing with that, I felt very alone, but my way of dealing with it, thank God, was through music. So I taught myself piano from locking myself in the music rooms every lunch, every break. If you wanted to find Daniel, I'm at the music rooms, and I'm in the piano, I'm learning my way around the piano, and I'm writing music, and we talk about self-awareness. Music as a tool for young kids is amazing, because, you know, if I'm writing a piece of music, I have to understand how I feel, where I'm at, and then convert that into chord structure or melody or sound and silence, and you know, and loud and quiet, and music basically. And so I could take these experiences around Dad, put them into chords, put some lyrics over the top, express, and then out the other end would come again something beautiful. Again, the same lesson that I learned in primary school. Now I've got something where I've got the same model, because I could then go and perform it, and I'd impact people, or see people cry, or come up to me and say this was the best thing I've heard, you know, or whatever it is. And I could see that process of, okay, we've took a difficult experience, we've took it through this creative medium, and now something positive at the end. Again, it's a lesson. You look at my business now, it's the same. And so music was really powerful for me at that time, but school was fun for the most part. Really enjoyed secondary school. I had really good mates, but did have these polarizing times where I would cry myself to sleep in the evening for no apparent reason. Obviously knew what it was. I would write songs depicting scenes of suicide. I would write poetry about losing paps and being a young lad who wanted to take his own life, but being worried because he's got a little sister who also cries herself to sleep at night sometimes, and he don't want to leave her. And I'm talking about myself, you know, and it's like, you know, polarizing, and you don't know, you're not ever given the skills to manage that as a young person. It just is. It wasn't like this thing where I was like, okay, this is this. It just was. That was like life. That was my experience of life as my brain was developing. That's what I thought was normal. And so yeah, that was kind of my experience through school. But then obviously college, all that came to a head. Fell into drugs, you know, violence, just breaking my knuckles on nights out. As soon as I drink, it would turn to paps, it would turn to the sadness, it would turn to the rage. I would walk home and kind of like break my knuckles from punching walls or punching signs or lampposts on the way home. You know, I'd be starting on people, which is completely, I'm this kid who used to sing Ed Sheeran songs with a guitar and Justin Bieber in school, and now I'm, you know, now I'm like complete what seemed like a 180. And then started to battle with depression, anxiety at 17, suicidal ideation, carried that into uni, failed first year pretty much, failed after 2 years, just stopped going to uni, handed all my assignments in late, was kind of DJing techno and all that stuff, had a failed business after uni, again believing money would fix everything. I'm still chasing that, still not speaking to anyone, still going through it all on my own. 4 years of the depression, the anxiety, fell into the corporate world, was doing recruitment, so like a really high performance, high pressure role, struggled to really make any success of that, and then I ended up going through therapy, as I mentioned to you before, and transformational. And then a year after therapy, started my first business as the UK's youngest full-time mental health public speaker. You know, and now it's been 4 years. You know, worked with some of the biggest companies in the world. You know, got billion pound clients, which is amazing. But less around that. You know, worked with 65,000 people in person. Mentored some brilliant young lads who I've met on my journey from being a speaker. You know, being able to save lives, quite a few. We've had just the blessing of them reaching out and telling me the impact I've had on their own lives. You know, countless people that have started therapy and been able to make change in their own lives because of, you know, hearing my story and hearing me speak. You know, we did a tour across education, delivering 100 talks, free talks in 20 days across 63 schools to impact 25,000 young people. We're doing 200 talks for change in October. You know, did the TEDx talk, shared my story to 5 million people on TV for Channel 4, where I performed a song called Learn to Live, about my journey, exactly what I just spoke to you about, and, you know, showed that on stage, performed its piece of music, and that saved the lives of a number of men who reached out to me afterwards. And now I'm like, you know, now I'm at this point, and now that whole journey I look back on makes sense, and that's a big thing. And you know, because it didn't make sense for a while, and now it makes sense. And there's also given some meaning to an event which felt meaningless, if I'm honest with you. So that's the journey. You're going to get 20-minute answers for every question, by the way. We might need another 6 hours.
Honestly, yes, mate, thank you for sharing. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of bit like the dynamic like, with your sisters and stuff like that. What was how did your mum and your sisters and the family as a whole, did you communicate about did you ever talk about that within the family, about what happened with your dad? What was that dynamic like in that period?
No, there would just be... So let's talk about the family dynamics first. Christmas and birthdays, we'd chat about it, you know. But it would just be Mum going, you know, your dad's proud of you, and he loves you, all those things, and kind of would come up, and we wish Paps was here. Outside of that, not really. No, never really spoke to my sisters about it. I still kind of, you know, they know a lot about my own experience with it, and we had very different journeys. You know, like really, really different. Both my sisters, you know, as far as I know, have never gone through depression, never touched drugs, never smoked a cigarette, you know, never to kind of the extent of the difficulty that I've been through. They never really had that kind of, like, you know, the anger, the self-harm, all of those things. They didn't really experience. Now, that's not to say, you know, I know, and I'm aware of ways that it's impacted the both of them, 100%. But I had a very, very different experience, and I think, you know, I always, why, you know, why is that? I think age is a factor. Younger sister was 5, older sister was 14, 13, 14. So I was at a weird age where I knew Dad for quite some time, but I needed him in those points, especially when I'm developing. Needed the father figure. You know, my brain is still developing at that point, and now I've not got that support. I think that's one. Where obviously my sister was kind of like 14, just coming into, you know, the teens, so I didn't really have enough time, what felt like enough time with him. I think the other thing was, typically, young lads need they need role models, they need father figures in their lives. Like, we know that statistically. So I think that was one element. I think there's a lot of complexity around the event, as I mentioned, the phone call and some other scenarios around the event, which, for me, were my sisters didn't experience. And, those made the whole thing way more complex for me as a young lad to try and process. And then the things like drugs, the experience with drugs, the anger, that side of things, and the dropping out of uni and whatnot, which you can all pretty much trace back to the trauma in a sense. But every time I was going through that, nearly failing uni, the drugs, the inability to set boundaries in my relationships, because the first time I'd put a boundary in place, I lost Pap, so I didn't put boundaries in place with anyone, and the way that impacted my relationships, and then the failing university and all of the financial difficulty and the 13 different places of residence, like those things take a knock on you as well. And so it wasn't just the trauma of, the event, it was the things that came after it as a result of the way my brain had developed from the event, that then made life a lot more difficult to navigate. And I'm blessed beyond belief to be the one if I tap into anyone in my family, listen, give it to me 10 times over, because the fact that my sisters haven't had to go through some of those things, and I don't know the challenges that they face, and I'm not saying it from that point of view, but things like the self-harm and the depression, I'll take that 100 times over if it means that they don't have to go to some of the places that I've been, which is
Okay, I just wanted to say something about one of our sponsors, Search 7. They are a search marketing agency for social good. They elevate brands' online exposure locally, nationally and globally through strategic SEO and paid media consultancy. They specialise in many different sectors, including charities, e-commerce, travel, health and medical education, and professional and creative services. They also give agencies and charities the exposure they deserve via their hosted agency and charity events, helping to build community and connections. Their pledge is the inspiration behind their name. Since they started in 2011, they have pledged to give back 7% of their profits to charity. This has become a minimum of 7% each year, with their current fundraising surpassing £150,000 in support of 63 charities. Their latest campaign, #Share177k, aims to raise £177,000 by the end of 2026 to mark their 15th birthday. It's a pleasure to have them as part of the Series 7 of the podcast. I'm delighted. Thanks so much for your support.
Again, like we spoke a bit offline about this, but I guess like from, again, back to this role that a man or a young boy has to have within society, maybe them narratives that we're just programmed to think about. We're programmed to be strong, you've got to be the one, like, because the male role model was taken out, was there, no longer there because of what happened to your dad, and then, like you said, almost that you felt you had to step up and be the man, you had to be the strong one, and had to. So lends itself again back to that thing that you touched on a little bit before around understanding and processing emotion. Like boys we're not given those skills, I don't think, and especially when you go through something like that with as traumatic as what you have done. How do you even begin to do that? So how do we, like the stuff you go back in and talk to schools, I'm really keen to look at what do we do to go back in and fix that? How do we give, like if you could go back now and speak to 9-year-old Daniel and give him some of those skills that you've learned,
100%.
What would that look like?
So that's it, isn't it? That is the work that I'm doing now. The whole reason I do the work that I do in schools is to be the voice that I needed when I was younger, because that's the whole premise of my work. That's the foundation of my work. Is to be that voice that young lads especially need, but just young people need in general. So there's a few things that I want to pick apart in what you mentioned. The first being the idea of kind of like that inherent kind of role of a lad as he grows up, turning into a man, the inherent role of a man, or so it can seem, of like the provider and being strong and whatever it is. I'll be honest with you, don't think those are negative things. I I think those are beautiful things, you know, and I think those are okay to have, you know, as a man. And I think they're important for a lot of men as well. You'll speak to young lads and they'll say they want to be those things. That is okay. That is absolutely fine. And I don't think demonizing those things as, you know, well, you know, everyone can be, you know, lads shouldn't be providers or whatever it is. Like, if that's something that's important to them and they know that, sweet. If a lad doesn't want that and you know, wants would want to stay at home when he's older to look after the kids and wouldn't mind if his partner earned more money or whatever it is so he could raise his family, because all he's ever wanted to do is be a father, but you know, whatever it is, or that's also fine, because there's many ways to be a man, you know, that's it, isn't it? But I think the other side is, like, what's really important is I think the reframe for lads, or not the reframe, the education around the emotional intelligence piece, because, you know, that is, you mentioned about questions at the start. Like, I believe, like, the quality of your life is defined by the quality of the questions that you ask yourself. You know, it's the difficult questions that bring out the internal answers to the problems you may be facing in life, and it's that introspection. It's that self-awareness. It's that understanding of the self and the world and how you view the world and all of those sorts of things. And so you can fulfill those, and you can be who you truly are, without the bravado, without the ego, whatever it is. You'll have ego in some places, and again, you're not going to fully eradicate it. And I think it's healthy and important in some places, others not. Again, your own journey to understand what those things are. But I think for young lads, like, I think what's important is less around who we're trying to push them to be. Like, help them decide it for themselves. Like, help them come up with the answers to who they are. Help them just know themselves a little bit more. And I think the other side is, you know, we talk about, or a lot of lads will think, or some of the rhetoric from the, you know, the super traditional kind of masculine manosphere, Andrew Tate stuff, whatever it is. Some of that language can be damaging, because it's kind of like we're saying for lads not to be vulnerable. You know, don't show emotion, boys. You know, yeah, emotion will get you. You know, have people walk all over you, or you know, whatever it is. Don't show emotion. Don't be vulnerable. And I was saying this to you before. That language isn't great, because in telling young lads not to be vulnerable and not to show emotion or whatever it is, in the short term it's brilliant for them, because in the short term they're never made a fool of, for example, or they're never at risk of being made a fool of, or feeling like they're going to be judged, or whatever it is. But in the long term they end up voiding themselves of the things that bring fulfillment. So again, like, vulnerability to me isn't like a man, always a man crying or whatever, like we often say. Like, sometimes people can associate vulnerability with that. It's a part of it, you know, being okay with crying and being able to show emotion, brilliant. It is a part of vulnerability. But vulnerability to me, and well, just in general, I think is also starting the business. You know, even though you think people might judge you, it's being able to have connection with a woman or a partner or whatever it is, because and to be able to show that side of yourself, so you can have the meaningful relationship, rather than never being able to give yourself to someone because, you know, you want to protect that, you don't want to show emotion, or whatever it is. It is, you know, like I was saying before, engaging in things that are important to you, even if other people don't understand them. A lot of people nowadays, a lot of young people, stop doing things that they care about because of the fear of judgment of others. So again, they're not being vulnerable, and they'll stop doing things that are important to them. I was the same. I stopped singing at 16 because I wanted to be cool, or seen as cool. And the idea of singing heartfelt songs on a guitar, you know, when I'm banging gym twice a day and my lads are getting up to whatever they're getting up to in college, you know, didn't make sense. Didn't align to what I thought the world wanted me to be. And so I stopped doing something for me that was really important, singing, writing music, for the best part of 8-9 years. I still did music, but it was DJing and techno, because that's a bit cooler, do you know what I mean? So those sorts of things. And I think if we can enable people to understand themselves, understand what their values are, create a vision for who they want to be and what they want their life to look like, and then have the strength to stand by that, knowing that strength, if you want to be strong as a man or whatever it is being a leader. Can you, when everyone else is going this way, be strong enough to just still be you here? And by definition, understand that you are probably one of the strongest people by being able to do that and not just going with the crowd. So I think things like that are important for young men, and also having positive role models and people that, positive male role models. I think for young lads right now is integral because of some of the nonsense we see on social media, and that's the other piece.
How young do we start with that? Where does how young do we start measuring? Because I know, again, we spoke a little bit offline, but I'm going like, still now, like my twins are 10, so they're still in year 5 now, but going through it, still there's an academic focus on what they've got to learn X, Y, and Z, and there's nothing around emotional intelligence in schools. And I think surely even at that young age, can we still go in and we start educating them then around 100%. Emotional intelligence?
So we talk about kind of the role kind of stigma plays in preventing people from getting support. The idea of the reason that we haven't, or generations haven't started those internal conversations is because they weren't happening in primary school. We weren't having them. They weren't happening in your household when you were growing up. Weren't really happening in mine. Secondary school the same, and then same, still not happening at home, and then it's not happening in your social circle. And then what happens then when you're a 16-year-old and you experience depression for the first time, as like 25% of them do nowadays, of young people do. If I've never seen or heard a conversation or even know what that looks like or whatever it is, and I know this is outside the topic of character development, but I'll come back to it in a moment. But if I've never seen that, I'm going to hide it. I'm going to push it away because it's alien and I've never heard or never seen a conversation. I don't even know what it is. So on my life, I'm not going to talk about it because where have I seen it modelled? I haven't. So I'm going to hide it. And so this is it's the same concept with the emotional intelligence and the skills to be able to communicate some of these things that we're speaking about and understand the self, like understand who you are and ask yourself the questions and have tools like journaling and introspection to understand who you are. And so if we can start that earlier, I'm a great believer, and part of my journey and my future plans are to specifically do what we're speaking about, is to give young people those skills and those tools which aren't typically being taught in the curriculum because obviously the system is extremely outdated. But those skills and those tools are becoming ever more important because of the pressures that young people are facing as they grow up. We know that as a society. So, even if, when you're young, you can start in guys, what are big emotions? Get me some faces on the board. What does this face? What big emotion is this? And what big emotion is this? Do you know, guys, when you're feeling this big emotion over here, if you do these things, this will make them feel small again. And this is how you can make a big emotion become a little bit smaller. If you go out and play football or whatever it is, or meditate, or if you do this or whatever it is, we can start to deliver those messages in a way that's digestible for young kids from a really early age, 100%. But I think the other thing is, we see other tools. We see a reduction of creative arts from the education system at the moment. If I did not have music, I genuinely don't know where I would have been, because that was my expression. It was my understanding of myself. It was my quiet time. It was my solitude. It was the understanding of the world around me at a time when I didn't know what was going on. It was my ability to be able to process that. It was my ability to get kind of praise and to create and to stimulate the brain and to develop creative pathways in my own brain, So it's and we see a reduction of that from schools. So again, because the focus now in schools is academia, grades, bam bam. It's all the highest performing academies and academic trusts have this really regimented view on it's grades, and if you can't function in the classroom, you're out. And it's I don't believe it's great for the kids who can work well, but for the kids who've been through trauma, who can't function in the classroom because of the adverse childhood experiences they've been through and the way that's impacted the brain and their capacity to be able to focus, that's no good. And so I think if we can develop those skills, but it isn't just on the education for the students, it's the schools, isn't it? It's the system itself around what can we give to children to equip them with the tools to navigate the challenges that they're facing in life, as we see an increase of mental illness, whether you want to correlate that to actually more people are struggling or more people are talking, but whatever it is, it's there. It's there.
I think there's got to be that we're all in it together, almost in the sense that it's because again, as a parent of twins who are 10, like, there's no rule book for being a parent either. That's a learning curve in itself, right? So trying to learn and navigate those feelings, and again, from learned behaviour. I was brought up unconditional love, beautiful parents, both of them. Did we have the type of conversations I've had with my kids? Absolutely not. Just was they're just not within the realm of those types of conversations. It's for me. There's got to be that element that parents and schools and the education system and teachers are all on this path together. But me, I guess why I'm frustrated, because I talk about the education system on here so much, and like, there's not one person sitting opposite me that doesn't go, yeah, it's a bit broken. And I'm sitting there talking to someone like you who goes into schools and actually, through your experience, are able to show how important it is to understand emotion and communicate. Communication's got to be such a big element in this whole scenario, right? That so many kids on phones like this now, concentration spans, not able to just hold a conversation like we are now.
100%. And that's the piece, isn't it? COVID was a huge factor in that, because in COVID, kids are locked down, and what they're on the devices, because they're not in social situations. And so when the brain is developing for these young people, and they got 2 years where the only communication they can have is on a device, at a time when kids didn't really need to be locked down in that sense. I think frustrating, because the impact, that's massive. And so they're proficient at speaking on devices. You ask it, you'll see them typing away, bam, 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 messages going 100 miles an hour. It's like loading a Windows 98 computer nowadays. It takes about 20 minutes for them to get a few sentences out, because other than that, you're getting this and then back down. Yep, bang, sweet. You see them walk into rooms when I'm doing classes, and the head's down, shoulders shrugged forward. Like it's like, and it's sad. It's really sad that that's something that a lot of the kids are experiencing. And so human connection is integral, really, really important, and the education and just doing more human things. I think as we go towards a more digital age, that's going to be super important. But I'm blessed to be able to do this work and to be able to go into schools, and do the work that I'm doing. It's amazing. It genuinely is a privilege, but it's also kind of it's frightening as well, because you speak to kids who are going through some really, really challenging times. And
what are they like, just from your experience? What are some of the challenges that when you're in schools and you're speaking to these young adults, young boys, whatever? What is the challenges that they're sharing with you that they're facing at the minute?
It's been from extremes, from kids who have planned to take their life, and we've been able to get them support from that day, and I've been the first person that they've told, and we've been able to get them support through school. The amount of kids who will write me notes about kind of depression and anxiety that they're facing, and or self-harm and whatnot. It's prevalent. We're at a point in the system where things like anxiety, depression, self-harm, eating disorders are at an all-time high. It's not a joke. It's a serious thing. I think with the one thing that I see with lads especially is they're all crying out for connection. They're all crying out to like put the bravado down and be the lad, be the boy. Do you know what I mean? Like, be the child. Like, they're all crying out for those little moments where they can just be themselves and put off the weight of that feeling that they need to all have a black jacket and all listen to a certain type of music and all use the same sort of language and all be this macho man when they're in school, and then they're at home, they're speaking differently and using different words, and they come back to school. Do you know what I mean? It's like, is that piece, and there's a huge pressure on them at the moment. But when you create the space for them, and you build connection, you'll see amazing things happen, and they'll be very open about things. And my other thing is, there's a lot of rhetoric around young lads being, is your young lad a killer? As we saw headlines after adolescence. Do you know how I get really? It makes me so angry, because I meet I'm yet to meet a lad where I've gone, yeah, no, I don't like you. He might come in there and he might be a bit hostile at the start. That's my role as someone to build connection, because his experiences won't potentially. That's what he's built. That's his defense mechanism. Once I connect with him, there's no young lad that I'll meet that I'll not see a bit of magic in, or I'll not think is actually brilliant in some way. And some of these articles and the headlines and the narrative around young boys being, this or that, I think is nonsense. And what's it going to do when they see that, when they see these headlines about young lads being this or lost or aggressive or anger, and it's like, it's not going to do them any good. Like, when we start believing in the young lads and building them up, and speaking positively about who they are and what they can do in this world, but then helping them understand, okay, well, what are your actual values, and what's your vision for life? Because I'll sit down with these lads and they'll always put me with the most challenging lads in the school, and I'll spend 2 hours with them, and all the values are in the right place. They'll talk about family, they'll talk about responsibility, they'll talk about how they want to be honest, and they want people to respect them and to show respect back as well. And and then they'll define a vision for themselves, and it will always be around how they want to build like a wonderful. They might not want to know what they're doing as a career, but they'll talk about how they want to build a loving home with a family that's supportive, and that's a whole unit. And they have these amazing dreams that they want to hit, and they might throw the car in there or whatever it is. But it's all really positive stuff, and that is who they are down to the core. And yes, sometimes they may feel the pressure to be a certain way or whatever it is. That's a societal thing. But down at the truest core, no lad's like. Yeah, some of the things that we see anyway being said on.
Because look, adolescents, for the right reasons, well brought up a lot of brought this subject to light a bit more, which is a good thing in a sense. But like you said, there's not them great narratives out there around that, and I think inherently is it that the people that you are working with and the young lads that you do see, that is it that we all they just need someone to believe in them? Is it?
Yeah, honestly, you wouldn't believe. I had a lad I did a vision and values session again, the one that I spoke about a few times on the podcast there. And I had this lad came in and I was asking him the vision and values, so I was getting the lads to stand on one side of the room. I asked them a question, and it will present. It was a this or that question. So the question was, would you rather cheat on your exam and get a good grade, or fail knowing that you'd tried it on your own? That was the proposition. And I say, look, there's no right or wrong. We're just trying to find out what your values are. This will help explore that. Stand on which left side of the room if you would cheat to get the good grade, left side of the room if you wouldn't and you would rather fail but knowing you've done it your own, right side of the room. And I got a group of like 12 lads, and like 9 of them go this side to the would rather fail, and 3 lads are on this side. So I asked one of the lads a question: why have you chosen the answer? Why would you rather cheat? And he goes, I'm thick, sir, because I'm thick. And I remember just having like this reaction, like of just like this I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about it, like this overwhelming sense of sadness for how he viewed himself, but care for like what I wanted to give to him. Yeah, and I just wanted to show him, and I said, listen, so this lad, 15, big geezer, plays rugby. Yeah, he's a super fit lad, obviously captain of his, I think one of the leaders, captain of his rugby team. I knew all this because obviously I'd spent a bit of time getting to know the boys in the session. Again, the art of human connection. And then I said, okay, all right. I said, you think you're fit? I said, listen. I said, do you know how to create a winning strategy on a rugby pitch? He goes, yes, sir, I do, yeah. I said, all right. I said, you're the captain of your team? He goes, yeah. I goes, do you know when your boys are struggling and you're down, do you know how to connect with everyone, with the whole team, and do you know how to inspire them and motivate them to change the mindset around so they can win? And he goes, yes, sir, to be fair, I do that quite a lot. I said, all right, okay then. I said, obviously you go gym, don't you? He goes, yeah. I said, if I asked you, say I've never been gym before, I said, could you write me a basic training plan that would allow me to put on size, become fitter, and maybe lose some body fat in the process? He goes, yeah, I could do that for you, yeah. I said, are you stupid? I said, and you could see the cogs starting to change. His mind is like, are you thick? I said, you're a genius in the right places. I said, at the moment, you're basing who you are off someone else's structure of what it means to be clever. So in this environment, maybe in academia, maybe you're not you're not so prevalent at maths or science, but you can do a lot of things on a rugby pitch and in sports that some people would never be able to do in their whole entire lives. So it's just in this environment, this is where your genius is. That's all it is. And you could see him, and he lit up and he smiled, and he just went, he went, "Thank you, sir." And afterwards, goosebumps now. And he came and he shook my hand afterwards, and his whole demeanour, body shifted up, like he starts to stand tall again, and he just had this smile about him. And for the rest of the session, engagement was through the roof. And he wrote me a letter afterwards. He wrote me a note, give it to the teacher, and she sent me a picture of it. And again, he just showed it and expressed his gratitude, and it talked about how he's helped me. I helped him see and believe in himself, basically. And then when he delivered his talk at the end, so I got him to write a letter from a future version of themselves that had achieved all of the dreams. So in that process, they have to understand what their vision is. And it's like, so you in 10 years, if you'd achieved all your dreams, you're writing back to the 15-year-old version of yourself from when you were 25. And it will say, you know, it will help them to define what they want their life to look like, but also the steps it took to be able to get there. I had to be more disciplined. You know, sometimes I was playing around in class and I had to make sure that I sat away from certain people. So whatever it is, or I had to work on my fitness or whatever. And so he wrote this letter out, and he presented it. He spoke to the whole group, and the pride in this boy, talking about what he wanted to do and what he wanted to build for his family. And I said, "Do you believe it's possible?" And he goes, "Yes, sir, I do now." I'm like, "That's it." And wow. the other thing is, and this has happened in a lot of mentorship with young lads, is like, when you focus on academia with these boys, of course you're not going to see behavioural change because they hate school, and every lesson they've been in, they're in battles with teachers, you know, because they don't feel understood. You know, they're getting into trouble. There might be stuff going on outside of school because they don't feel like they fit in. No one believes in them. I come completely, if I'm mentoring kids or working with kids, I say, "Listen, mate, I'll be honest with you, I just don't care about your grades. I do care about your grades, but I'll tell him that I don't." Why? Because he also doesn't care about his grades. Yeah, and I know that if I start, listen, your grades are really important, bang, he's gone. It's just the same as what he's heard 1,000 times over. And I do care about those things, but not as much as I care about the individual. If I sit across from this lad and go, I'll be honest with you, that's not the priority for me. And let me go first. I'm going to tell you about my story, and you don't even have to work with me. I'm going to give you the option to work with me if you want. I'm going to help you, let you make the decision. If after I've shared why I'm here and my story and what I want to do, if you decide, "Nah, Dan's not the one for me," sweet, it's no problem. That's absolutely fine. Every single person that I give that control to and I share my story first will work with me. And then I'll just focus on them. What are your dreams? Oh, this is amazing. Amazing that, you know, what some of them will say amazing things at 15, like know where they want to go. And these are lads who have the worst behavioural issues. And I'll sit down with them and I'll build it out. What's your gym routine like at the moment? Do you want any help with it? And I'll help them on those areas. I'll help them with journaling. I'll help them with like some of the key questions around, you know, really introspective questions. And they will then, what do you see off the back of it when you give them that belief? And when they've got someone who they respect, who's connected with them, who believes in them too, so they can see it for themselves, what do you see on the other side? Attendance go up, you know, engagement in lessons go up, people them coming in and wearing the uniform correctly, and, you know, and wanting to work towards the vision, and therefore engaging in school a little bit more, and your byproducts of belief in themselves and building them up, and not tearing them down and telling them that they can't focus, that they need to do better, that they're a nuisance, or that, you know, they've not got a place inside, or they're lost, or young boys are toxic, and all of that nonsense, because it infuriates me. It really does. Like, start building them up, and you'll see the lads that you want to see in society, because they'll believe in themselves and they'll have hope for the future. And you give a kid that, and it only takes one conversation. That kid will remember it for the rest of his life. It only takes one of those moments, and it only takes one person to believe in him among an array or a society that doesn't. It only takes one person who they respect, who believes in them, for them to go, "Yes, I've got a future, and I know what it is." And we link it back to the idea of hope we mentioned at the start. When a kid like that can see hope for his future and can be proud of himself and proud of where he's going, the rest will come. The rest will come, and he will make better decisions because he has something to make better decisions for. And give him that. That's it. That's it. It's simple when it comes down to it.
Mate, I listen. Fucking hell. Okay, for someone that's got young kids that are in school, I'm like, and look, I think as a parent, these are the messages I want to give my kids. Like, these are the messages I try and talk to my kids about constantly. They constantly get messages from me about belief. No matter what, I will believe in them. Don't care. And academic stuff. I was shit at school. You know what I mean? I'm like, that was just not my. But you go, what? So me and you sitting here now, we're talking about this, right? So many people say, what? Why the fuck then is something not being done about the education? What? How do we fix that? How do we go out there and change that now? Because so many people are recognising this. Right? This is you listen to you talk with that passion. But I've got goosebumps listening to you tell me that story. Right? Going so many of these kids need is just someone to believe in. And I'm not bad having teachers. I think teachers have got it fucking so hard.
Teachers are the superheroes of today's society. My mum's been a teacher for 40 years, and
Absolutely.
what they put into the role is incredible. But
it's what they've got to work with, right? The curriculum.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, interrupted. But
but how do we fix? How do we? What if me and you sit and most of the people I sit opposite me who have gone on to achieve amazing things in life, and the stuff that you're doing is having such an impact on so many people's lives, can see it, and yet we're still going, but we're still going to carry on doing this academic thing.
Yeah. Service brings it on quite nicely, isn't it? I think my whole journey for the rest of my life will be dedicated to making sure that the ecosystem that I have, whether it's working with some of the biggest companies in the world, the supporting organisations through social value to, win projects which delivers stuff for free into schools, whatever it is, I'm going to do whatever I can by hell or high water to make sure that the next generation are supported, and that's me. And I know within myself that over the next 5 to 10 years, I'm going to impact probably hundreds of thousands of kids and families at home and teachers in schools, just me. Because every time we do the tour, for example, we're doing 200 Talks for Change in October. That's probably about 35,000 people, 25,000 kids, probably roughly, the rest made up in families at home and teachers. And that'll be every single year. And then we've got the social value projects that I'll run alongside schools, and then where every time we, a certain percent of our profits goes to funding stuff for free to schools. I have these big social value contracts supporting organisations to grow by delivering stuff and helping on CSR, for example. So when a company wants to give back to a good cause, we'll support them in the process, so we can do stuff for free for schools and bring the barrier down for schools so they don't have to pay and they can still invest in other services, whatever it is. It's about action. It's about people like me and you driving this conversation forward, because change, like, it's fair enough you get people who will say, I want to make change, or what you're doing about it. Go and do something about it then. Like, that's the thing, is like, it's fair enough saying stuff, but like, go and do something about it. And the beautiful thing about doing something about it when it comes to kids in education is there is no greater place where you get a greater reward for your service. Like, when you're working with the kids, this is why I'm saying to you, like, I can die happy tomorrow, because there's no greater reward than a kid messaging you, going, Dan, 2 weeks before you talk, I tried to take my own life, and after your talk I went home and I spoke to my family truly about everything, and I've been getting counselling and I've been engaging with it, because I know that's something that you said was important on your talk, and you've helped me feel comfortable doing that, because I don't feel like I'm weak anymore when I do it. And it's been 3 months and I got a girlfriend and I've started playing guitar and life is a lot better, and I just want to thank you. Like, there's not a price you can put on that sort of stuff. And so the beauty about taking action yourself is that you get a massive reward for doing so. But the process isn't always easy. I get that. I've been doing it for 4 years, and I'm just getting to the point where that model of being able to offer stuff for free for schools, we realised it 18 months ago with the first tour, which worked off a corporate sponsorship model, and now I'm bringing it more at the foundation of my work, which is amazing. I am one person. Yeah, there's just me. Who kind of had this vision and wants to bring it to life. Like, imagine if everybody gets together a little bit here and there, just even if it's offering some mentorship to a school, because you run a business and you get your employees to help them with some of the soft skills that we're speaking about, and it's an hour a month for 20 of your staff, yeah, and you can give that to a school in your local community. Whether you have a powerful voice and you can public speak and actually want to start that journey supporting kids, whether you've always wanted to mentor people, whether you want to support a charity and offer some volunteering or some finance to a charity that supports youth in education. The more we start pushing these conversations, and the more we start taking the action to do the work, the greater change hopefully we can see. But obviously there's a wider systemic issue around society as a whole, government, politics, all that, which, I can't change that yet. Give me 5 years potentially. But what can I do? And I know I'm doing what I can do. I'm not doing as much as I can do, and I'm going to be at a point, hopefully in the next few years, where I'll really start to meet how much change I want to create with where I'm actually at in life, because I feel, even now I feel behind in what I'm doing, which is, again, the idea of success we can come on to if we have time. But I would say is the action. If people knew how easy it was, because I don't believe it's too difficult, a bit of thinking, a bit of changing mindset, a bit of planning, and you can do amazing things. Like all adults have got something that they can teach a young kid, because that's the journey of growing up in it. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's you go to the gym or fitness, or you can run some classes after school or whatever for young kids, whether you're a musician, whether it is, you just maybe you're amazing with organisation or finance. You work in the finance sector and you want to educate young kids on the importance of financial literacy, whatever it is, or everyone's got something they can teach a young person or give to someone, and be of service more. That's what I would say. Take the action ourselves.
Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast.
Mate, it's fucking so inspiring. It's incredible, and you're doing so much great work and changing people's lives, mate. And this, again, I always say when I sit opposite people who just, the enthusiasm and the inspiration just comes off of them. I go, for me, you're creating a world that I want to bring my kids up in, right? That's something that is something magical. And I think I just want to add two points really. One, someone listening, an adult, and listening, who's maybe struggling themselves.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in that dark place, what do you say to them an adult now? And then I want to look at if it would be the same message to a kid as well.
It's hard, isn't it? Because without knowing what that individual, so to go into, it will be from a surface level point of view, because obviously I don't know in this hypothetical sense what the individual is struggling with in that sense. The advice that I would always give to someone first and foremost is try it yourself, try and fix it yourself, and that's okay as well. What does fixing it yourself look like? Well, the reason why therapy and some of that work is often very impactful and can be really impactful, especially when you have the right therapist, is because they're a vehicle for introspection. They'll never give you the answers. They are kind of like a fast track to help you find the answers that kind of you need for yourself in a sense. When we're talking about your more common mental health conditions, obviously with severe illnesses, schizophrenia and whatnot, medical treatment, professional treatment, 100%. But if we're talking about kind of someone who's got into a rut, who is in a very dark place, struggling with how to get out of it, struggling with depression, suicidal ideation, whatever it is, those sorts of things, then this is what I'm kind of speaking about in that sense, when it comes to the idea of, okay, well, try and fix it yourself. And what does that look like? Again, as I said, therapy is kind of a fast track for introspection. Conversation with ourselves is the most integral thing, because that's where you find potential answers. And you know, I kind of that journey of introspection of self work is almost like tangled headphone wires that you pull out your pocket before AirPods existed. You know, there's a ton of different wires that are all interlinked and all over the place, and you have this puzzle in front of you, and you've got to go, okay, sweet, well, if I pull this one, maybe that'll loosen it up a bit. And you pull it, and it makes it tighter, and you go, oh, it's not that one. You pull another one, that doesn't work, and you keep pulling, and sometimes you make it worse as well. Like, sometimes you make the thing even more tangled, and you sit there going, it's going to be another half an hour. Yeah, and then you pull one day, and it goes, oh, okay, sweet. That feels, I don't know if it is, but to me, that feels like that might be the one. Okay, it was brilliant. Let me pull this one note back. Okay, that one was. And then you keep pulling these little strings, these little parts of your muddled up headphones, and you start to see a way out. And it becomes less entangled and less intertwined. And the closer you get to the end, the easier things, you know what the route is, and the easier it is for you to then untangle them and have these headphone wires again. In that sense, they'll probably get tangled at some point again in your future, but you'll know again, potentially have the skills to untangle them a little bit easier. And I think it's like that idea of kind of that's what that working on yourself really does. So you can do those things on your own, and I would say, you know, start with the basics. It sounds trivial, but you know, the amount of people that I speak to who, you know, are going through difficulty, but then they don't train, for example, they don't move their body. You know, the sleep is terrible, and the diet isn't too great and obviously those things can be a byproduct of the space that they're in, but you know, put your effort into the basics first, because getting the right sleep and training will go a long way to creating a better change for you, you know. And but the thing is, then if we go, you know, say we're doing the internal work, we're journaling, we're trying to understand, you know, what it is to solve ourselves, we're getting to the gym, we're doing those fundamental basics that we might have let slipped a little bit, and if, let's say, we're still not feeling better, time goes by, we don't know what the answer is, don't keep banging your head against the wall, then ask for support. If you get to a point where you're exhausting all your resources, it's making you more tired, and you still can't understand what the answer is, then I would look into, you know, support, and whether that's kind of like counselling, whether it's therapy, whether it is just relying on your mates, or speaking to work to access internal resources, like accessing some external support so you can get back to flourishing, whatever that is. I think those can be great ways, you know, to sometimes we need that support. I needed that support. I needed therapy in order to be able to create the change for myself. And my difficulty came from a very complex place, which was unresolved childhood trauma, and that was too big a challenge for me to solve on my own. So I did need the help of a professional. Amazing. Other kind of fundamental things, we just look at that kind of like the idea of service again. I think a lot of the time, when people have kind of depression or they're struggling, it's kind of like that disease within themselves, you know, like they don't feel great on their outlook of life, whatever it is. The idea of service again is a huge way to find purpose and to find meaning and to find hope again for the future, as I was talking about. And again, what we mentioned at the start about it, shifting the perspective. Service is one of the greatest tools I use to look after myself now. And you know, I even feel it when I'm not of service for a certain amount of time. If I don't do the talks, if I don't work with the kids, I can feel the knock-on effect a little bit. Because what does service give? Meaning, purpose, joy, gratitude, hope. And those are powerful tools to help us feel positive about wherever we're at in life. And that's why I was saying about helping others is the other part of that equation. Yes, try and do the work yourself, but in that work, try and be of service. And I'm the greatest believer that we're all craving connection, and we don't have it in today's society. Well, not that we don't have it, but it is becoming few and far between. Yeah, because we're always tied to social media, we're tied to phones, you know, we're tied to screens. We are seeing a reduction in social spaces. People are socializing less, people are becoming more and more lonely, and you know, we don't have that connection, and we're losing the skills to even connect with ourselves, like we spoke about. How many adults even know what their own values are, have ever asked themselves that question? It's very rare, because I do training on it, and they're like, oh, I've never asked myself this, you know. And so we're also missing the tools to connect with ourselves as adults. If we focus there, and if you start there, you know, that will go a long way to bringing that kind of the feelings of fulfillment into your own life, meaning, purpose, and whatnot. So yeah, that would be kind of my all over the shop formula. But there's nothing wrong in accepting help and support, and do that sooner rather than later as well.
And I guess with the again, I'm listening to everything you've spoke about, and actually, is it as well with that? Is it that talking to kids, not talking to them as adults, but giving them a respect? The reason that maybe is it that they respond to you and they're able to open up then and discuss in certain aspects, because you don't necessarily just talk to them like they're a kid, and you talk to them with a mutual respect element. Is there that side of it that maybe we're not giving kids enough credit at a young age, and actually, if we're to go in and if we change that education system, if we start educating them around emotions and communication and these things, that you're giving them the tools, and because you're allowing them the respect, and I guess giving them the permission by you sharing your story. This is what you enable people to do by you openly sharing your stories. You give other people permission to be able to do that, don't you?
100%. Human connection, again, is what we're talking about in essence to that. The reason why kids are able to be so open with myself, and I'm also able to create behavioural change, is because of the connection piece first. And how do I build connection? Storytelling is an amazing tool for that. We see engagement on social media goes up 300 times when stories are told. Engagement in in-person training, 65%. People retain information 22 times more likely when stories are told. Neurocoupling happens when stories are told. So if I'm in the audience, if you're in the audience and I'm telling you a story as the speaker, it's going to activate regions in the brain that release oxytocin, that form trust, the bonding chemical. All of those things help build a really strong connection. But then there's also the element of, I've been where you've been, and I'm going first. And so I'm creating the floor. And it shouldn't be the kid that creates the floor first. It shouldn't be. Because our role as adults in society, as carers, is to make kids feel safe, isn't it? And I would never expect a kid to tell me stuff without me telling them my stuff first. Simple as that. And I say to him, look, I'm not going to expect you to do anything that I'm not going to do today in the session. And so I just want you to know that here's a little bit about my story, and I'm not saying you have to tell me yours. I just want you to know this is where I've been at, and I need you to understand that, so that if there's anything that you want to ask me about my life, I want you to know that you're free to do so. There's nothing that you're going to say that's wrong, and I want you to know everything about who I am. And that's just an amazing way to open the floor for connection. And that's what that is. Like I'm connecting with myself as well in the process of doing it, and they can see that. And so it's, that's what it is. It's human connection. And so when I have like that relationship forming, then, because it's a strong way to form relationship and respect, 100%. Then it's like, now we've opened this platform for the dialogue, for me to be able to just have open conversation about them, for them to open up about maybe experiences they're going through, or what their values are, and to trust me with that, and so on and so forth. But I have a responsibility then as an adult and as someone who has created that space to withhold that, and to be someone who they can trust, and to act all those things out, and to support them, and to believe in them, and to be the right person for that environment as well. And so there's a responsibility on my shoulders to make sure that I'm giving them what they need in those moments. But I think all comes down to human connection, and when you can connect in whatever aspect that is, when you can build connection with a child or a student or anyone or an adult, or an old man, whatever it is. When you can build connection, then my belief is, not my belief, what's true is that then you have the capacity for someone to realise their potential and work towards their potential. We look at kind of like the role of like empathy. We always say that the most empathetic leaders in the world, or the best leaders in the world, are the most empathetic. Statistically, we see when an employee has an empathetic manager, we see that innovation and creativity goes up. So how willing they are to solve problems goes up. Their engagement in the role goes up. Why is that? Because of trust, because of empathy. What is empathy? Helping someone feel seen, heard, understood. What's the byproduct of an employee being more creative and more engaged? Outcomes are better. What's the byproduct of them having better outcomes in a business? they progress, they realize the potential, they feel better, they feel kind of like they've fulfilled a part within themselves, like they're growing, they're moving forward, they're progressing, they're reaching potential. So my whole thing is like human connection is the gateway to people realizing their potential, whoever they are, wherever they are, whatever they are, at whatever point of life. And it's the human connection which is the vehicle for people realizing that. And so that's the thing for me is that that's the formula. And the slogan to my business is for my business is called LivedX. www.livedxlearning.com if you need.
We'll be dropping it in the show notes. We'll be dropping it in the show notes.
But the tagline is harnessing the power of lived experience to cultivate human connection and human potential, because stories are the quickest way to form connection. Connection is the quickest way to unlock potential. Potential is the best way for someone to feel, someone realizing that potential to grow into the person of themselves they know they can be, is a great way to solve a lot of the issues when it comes to mental health that we're seeing, and that's if I could boil everything down to a sentence, it would be that sentence. So
amazing, mate. What's next for you? What does the future hold for Daniel Wilshire?
Difficult question, because I've spent the past year talking about these amazing things that are going on in the business, and these amazing plans, and these amazing dreams, and these amazing things that I've been waiting to get to in the business. And the plans haven't always gone as I've hoped to, and I have these brilliant dreams. And I think over the past year I've got probably attached to outcomes a little bit too much again. Bigger deals now, bigger clients, bigger this, bigger that, which all funds more impact and more change. But I think I'm drawing myself back to to the space of just how simple it is to just be of service. So I'm just going to continue being of service in the business. I'm going to grow the business out, utilising the ecosystem to fund stuff for free into schools. Got the speakers in the business, now 12 speakers, which is amazing. Just to continue to create change in education, support the corporates, run incredible projects, try and look after myself in the process, and continue to grow, stay grounded, and then launching the drinks business, obviously in a couple of months, which is very exciting. But I'm not going to speak about them, but I have some very, very large plans to tackle some of the things that we've spoken about today on a scale much bigger than what I've been showing. And I feel like, this 4 years has just been to get me to the start of the rest of my life, and I feel like I'm very much just beginning my journey of entrepreneurship. I'm going to have no air left by the end of it, but but I feel like I'm just beginning, and I'm excited about that, and I've learned so much over these 4 years, and now I feel like that was a warm-up, and so I'm getting ready to just, what's next for me is just to get started now, to get properly started on things seriously.
Mate, it's amazing. I think you've what you've done already, like, and what I know you've got the capability and potential to do and impact and change this world is incredible. From seeing you on that stage at that TEDx talk, to having the honour and privilege of obviously sitting here opposite you today and being able to share your knowledge and wisdom and just genuine heartfelt inspiration for so many people listening. I urge so many, especially parents, teachers listening to this, just fucking take so much from how you communicate, the things you talk about, but how you communicate as well. There's something so powerful in that, and your story as a whole, mate, is changing people's lives. So thank you.
I appreciate that, man. It's always amazing for me to hear those things, because it's easy to get lost in my own, because what I want to achieve for people is so great, and I want to make so much change. And I'll be honest, as an entrepreneur, I do feel behind, and sometimes I can lose myself in that. And so I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on those things, because it always brings me back down to earth to understand that, like, this is the reason I do the things that I'm doing, and being able to continue on this journey of just sharing the story in the way that you've expressed, and just being as true a version of myself as I can be, you know, and the fact that that's inspiring and helping people, it's always important for me to remember that and to be reminded of it, because I easily forget it myself. So thank you very much for that.
I think something really key, and something I try and tell me, because again, back to where we are in society, back, I guess, taking it full circle back to the beginning and what success means and where we are. We can put so much on the outcome, so much on the attainment of something, that's where we feel that I am going to achieve it. Once I've achieved everything, then it's okay. But actually, no, just taking a moment. It doesn't mean stop being ambitious and go and change, because you are going to go and change the world even more than you have done. But just taking a moment to go, actually, what you've done up until now, right now, today, you're enough just as you are, and that is unreal, right? And I try and again back to the kids, and trying to give them that message as well, that, you know, you're not defined by that or what you've achieved or how much impact, but just actually you just showing up as yourself in this world is enough. And that's I think that's an important thing to take away, especially when we reframe it and you go back to that success piece. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, especially for young kids, there's an obvious element of, you know, if you're engaging in behaviours that aren't good for you, you know, and like if you're not working towards something that's meaningful to you, for example, or, you know, if it is possible for change to be required for somebody to create change. I'm not saying like it's not important to work on yourself and work on your goals, and just whatever you are at whatever point is okay, because that isn't the case for everybody. I think for young kids though, like, we're expecting them to have everything figured out from such a young age, where it's like, just there's an element of just letting them be kids as well, you know, in that sense. I think it's important to tell, you know, and it's that dual conversation, isn't it? It's important to make sure that we guide them towards wanting the best for themselves and defining what success looks like for them, and for them to work towards that, because it's the pursuit of working towards something which, you know, is actually really important for people, and when it comes to well-being. But it's the definition of what is something worth engaging in, which is where we're kind of missing it, because at the moment there's one standard which is being fed from social media, which is be rich, be this, have following, have this and this. That might not be right for someone. So it's about, like I said, it's important to work towards things, but it's about helping them define what it is they want to work towards. And as long as they can say, yeah, well, I'm moving towards being a better person over here, and I'm moving towards showing up for my friends a little bit more, because I know that's something important for me, and I wasn't doing it the past year, and so now I'm doing it. And music's really important, so I'm going to work towards that. Important to have things to work towards. This isn't like kind of that conversation of what I was mentioning, but also, like you mentioned there, it's like, if they're like getting them to be, or getting individuals to be okay with not being at the final goal, understanding that it is the process which is the beauty anyway, you know. That's the piece, and that's the, you know, that's it, and that's hard even for me, because, you know, I can sit here and I can say, you know, I'm really grateful for what I've done, but I still have parts of me that are like, Dan, you're not good enough, you're not doing enough, you haven't impacted enough lives, this and this, but that's what it means to be human, isn't it? And as long as I know what my kind of centre line is to come back to when those narratives are there, I can at least pull it back. I'll be honest with you, there are also times though where I can use that as fuel to, you know, to move towards the goal that I've outlined for myself. But I think for, like I said, for those young kids, and the helping them to define who they are, to understand who they are, and to be okay with whatever that is, wherever they're at, and to support them in the pursuit of becoming a better individual that can give to society in whatever aspects that is, whether creative or whether it's business, or whether it's just being of service to the community, or helping the woman down the road and helping them to become those impactful members of society, because that's what society should be, that's what community should be, you know. Then that's an amazing thing to do, and I think if we can focus a little bit on that a bit more, then we're in a good spot. So,
mate, amazing. Look, we've got a bit of a closing tradition.
Okay, a closing tradition.
So we talk our storytelling dinners, right?
Yeah.
And I use our storytelling cards.
Okay,
so
I got to pick a card.
You've got to pick a card, any card,
So.
and then pass it back to me, and I'll read you the question.
I'm connecting with the energy in the room.
Right, okay. Recall a time you felt utterly at peace. What brought that feeling about?
Utterly at peace. It's a very interesting time after I finished therapy, and there's been moments of peace in my journey of entrepreneurship, but by definition, entrepreneurship is not peaceful. Yeah, so so let me just tell people, yeah, it's been a great journey, but it's not easy.
It's not gonna bring you peace.
It's not utter peace, but it's the pursuit of what we're doing, and the sacrifice is peace at some points, and that's a worthwhile sacrifice to build what we're building. Anyway, peace, a true moment of peace after therapy, and I had this like 3-4 month period after I finished therapy where I'd stripped myself down, ego was gone, wasn't wearing nice clothes anywhere again, and didn't have any dreams and ambitions for the first point in my life. I didn't have like a big goal. I didn't have like a big thing to work towards. The reason why I'm saying why that was peaceful for me at that time was because I didn't need anything from myself or from the world, and I was just really comfortable with being who I was as like Daniel, and without the suit to work or without all those things, and I was like just really, really comfortable with who I was, and felt really connected to myself, and I feel connected to myself now more than ever in a lot of ways. But that was a really peaceful time for me. The beautiful thing, though, after that period of time was that when ambition and dreams started to come in again, all my ambitions and dreams before that were all just rooted in money. It was like, what can bring money? I got this big business idea to do this, or I was in recruitment because I heard you can earn 40 grand in a month or whatever it is. And then the dreams that came to me were all very different. It was like service. Go and speak to the kids because you want to be the voice when you're young, and build this, and we want to do something for education, build something great for education, and we want to share the music. And so the dreams that then ended up coming back after that period of time were all in line with authentic Daniel, which is why now life is different, because what I do every day is aligned with authentic Daniel in the most pure form of it. Like this is the reason I'm supposed to be on the earth. I believe that with every fibre and bone of my body, like Cass is. I believe I was given everything to get to this point, and so the peace in that journey of like initially just being comfortable with who I was, but then what blossomed from it being things that were just so aligned with who I am, and I think that period as well, before the chaos of entrepreneurship, but in the this is it, and that is my future, and this is what I'm going to do, and having that sense of peace, I would say that would be that kind of 3 to 6 months after therapy, where stripped it back, and then the dreams started to come in, but they were things that set me alight inside, and then now we're in the world of pressure and difficulty and less peace, but a lot of purpose.
Mate, amazing. Honestly, mate, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for coming on and just doing what you're doing in the world, because it is making it a better world. It's truly inspiring, and I'm just looking forward to. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to get to know you and connect with you, but I'm excited to see the future as well, and what that holds for you, and the impact that you're going to undoubtedly have on this world. So, mate, thank you very much.
I appreciate it. I appreciate making the time, and having a platform for pushing the conversation. I appreciate the ways you believe in me as well, because sometimes I lose that. So it's always nice to have these discussions, just to bring myself back to, back to kind of my centre line when I am going through difficulty myself. It's important for me, and so I appreciate everything that you said, and I appreciate you reaching out, and hopefully you will yeah, you'll see a bit of magic. The next few years, we'll see some cool stuff.
I look forward to it, mate.
Thank you, mate.
And as they say, he's a wrap.
That's a wrap.